So here is my presentation on my proposed line of research and what I've been working on all semester in trying to organize. So here's my study. I've been very transparent with everyone about, my status with my research and how, I've been directed to go back to the drawing board. And I pretty much spent the summer term reconstructing an entire research study. And so a lot of things after comps, a lot of things were up in the air as far as the direction that I wanted to take my research, and even whether I wanted to continue with this. So in the spring, I wrote a memoir for a class, one of my concentration courses. That memoir writing experience, we engaged in analyzing our personal experience around a central topic, and that was writing. So that experience was transformational in itself for me personally, but it also brought me a lot of clarity with the direction that I want to take things if I chose to continue at the end of the term. But everything else was up in the air. And so I spent this summer term trying to figure those things out. One thing that I was 100% sure about was my theoretical framework, which was critical linguistics. Scholars like Norman Faircloth, Ruth Bodak, Alistair Pennycook, and April Breaker Bell have all been influencing and informing my knowledge around critical linguistics. And pretty much what it's saying is that critical linguistics is an examination of how language and communication equates to power and access and culture in society. So one of the things that we know is language is a key indicator of membership within a cultural group, whether you're talking about your race, your regional dialect, indigenous languages, and intergenerational languages, which I'll get into on a later slide. But with all of these things, with language having such a major impact on your identity and who you are and who you associate with, we also look at the experiences of our students in schools and how the language of the schools is not equal to cultural languages. Like there's this big disparity. So students run into this gap, not this gap, but this conflict of their identity. Do they embrace who they are culturally, or do they go about embracing the language of the school so that they can continue to have access to certain realms that they would otherwise be excluded from? And then I covered the Alistair Pennycook. He talks about the 5 Ds that are listed here on this screen that encompass critical linguistics. There's domination, which is associated with power; disparity, which talks about access; discrimination, of course, those are perceptions of others. There are differences, referring to the stances, how my experiences as a Black person with language may be different from those of a white person. And then there's desire. What is the outcome? The agency and the hopes for identity and transformation with this topic. So those are the 5 Ds that Pennycook discusses. The purpose here in this study, I focus on my journey on embracing my cultural identity through language, using the theoretical lens of critical linguistics. I examine how my experience is related to a broader social and political context. And also, what can we do for our teaching practices going forward for students like me? How can we continue to embrace linguistically associated cultural identities of our students as classrooms become more and more diverse? The chosen methodology is an analytical ethnography. The memoir experience brought me here. So, writing a memoir, you encompass narrative inquiry, you encompass autobiography and ethnography to engage in analyzing personal experiences to understand a social issue. And that is exactly what analytical autoethnographies are. It balances personal narrative with um, scholarly academic discussions and articles with the hopes of adding something to the discussion, right? So to this field, I will be adding my experience of being a child of immigrants. My parents are from Trinidad and Tobago. Now, they only speak English, but they speak with a very thick accent. And I watched my mom be brushed off several times just because of the way she was speaking. And I've experienced having to translate her English to a more tolerable, understandable English, right? Then there's my experience of being Black in academia, because Black language is a formal language that has its own syntax and its own structure and its own way of being, which is not widely accepted in academic spaces. And then my experience of being born up north in Queens, New York, and then moving to Atlanta, Georgia, where the regional dialect is different. So using this analytical autoethnography embraces my subjectivities and puts my experience to the forefront. So I take on this role of researcher and participant. Why am I doing this? I mean, I could delve into into this whole space of Black English and breaking it down and what it is, or do a thing about code switching and get into that and my practice of code switching depending on who I'm around. But all of that research is already widely available. What's also already widely available is this same topic of critical linguistics in light of English language learning students as the participants. But what's not there is this same phenomena from the perspective of the researcher that has experienced the same thing. So I'm hoping that sharing my narrative opens the space for continuing discussions on how we are affirming cultural identities of our students. My projected research question is here. How are the researchers' interpersonal experiences with language and identity related to the larger realm of critical linguistics? Within this, I'll be considering these ethical concerns. Oh, I spelled implications wrong. But the implications of others, right? Because we are, as human beings, we do not exist in isolation. We have a network of people, right? So when I start to tell my narrative, there's a chance that I can invade the privacy of others that are associated with me. I could implicate them for whatever discriminatory actions they may have done. So one of the ethical concerns are how would I ensure the privacy of those people that are not necessarily the focus of my narrative, but they are included for detail purposes, right? The issue comes up about consent and so on and so forth. I mean, of course, the use of a pseudonym can mitigate that, but this is my narrative, so it's pretty easy to figure out who these pseudonyms are referring to because they are associated with me, closely associated. The second ethical concern is self-harm. What effect can drawing on these repressed memories and experiences have on me? As a researcher, what can it have on me and my identity? What implications and outcomes can it have on me as a teacher and generally as a person, right? And the whole purpose of this is to first do no harm. We're just doing research, right? But not to call, even when your participant is the researcher, these are things that have to be considered. And lastly, the major ethical concern with autoethnographies are trustworthiness. Like, are my narratives real or imagined? Are they embellished for the purpose of storytelling? Or embellished for the purpose of emphasis or relation to the theoretical framework. So trustworthiness, which I also spelled wrong, is a major ethical concern. The data collection. So the methods for data collection that I foresee, that I propose using, of course, are those self-observations and ethnographic field notes, self-reflective data, which involves journaling my reflections about experiences, and also to include excerpts from field notes and triggers that spark various memories and experiences with languages. I think it's really important to include those triggers because I'm talking about critical linguistics and how that relates to access and power. So what types of experiences am I going through daily that take me to a place of realizing that language is a factor in this situation? And then when I get to data analysis, right? The data analysis process for autoethnography is similar to that in narrative inquiry. And I've been going back and forth about using descriptive coding or in vivo coding. Either is appropriate in this space, in this study, as the first round of initial coding. But again, like I'm just now getting to the point where I'm figuring this out. So that's still up in the air. And I think I have a lot of time to figure this out, actually. And that's the end. I included this video here about Glorilla and how she faces the same phenomena and how, her accent, even though she's from Memphis, she's still, kind of looked at differently from the people of Memphis because based on her accent, people say that she's country. And when she goes to do interviews, people tell her they think that their perception of who she is that she's slow or she's not intelligent. They tell her she's saying things wrong, but then, who is it that says that there's a right and a wrong way to say words? And, these are all discussions and things that we need to take upon ourselves and really reflect internally and recognize the implications that they have on our students making comments like that. So this was really insightful. It gave me a lot to think about, this video. I'm not going to show it here in this clip though. That's my study. Thanks.